Well, that's a good question. I think that in all likelihood, what we would be dealing with. Now, I can't give anybody, any sort of like scientific taxonomy or anything because nobody knows. But from the related high strangeness and the cases that we've had where the being seemingly just appears and disappears at will, I wouldn't be at all surprised to find out that what we're dealing with is something capable of moving between dimensions or, frankly, is privy to dimensions that we are not. If you think of us as existing in, four dimensions, so basically three physical dimensions and then one dimension of time, maybe there are creatures that exist in 5, 6, 7, however many dimensions are out there, and being able to do that, or because of that quality, they're able to do things that are frankly impossible to us. Where they can just sort of appear and disappear at will and do all of this other stuff. So I guess that's a really long way of me saying I think that there is an interdimensional component to this. And, gun to my head, if I've got to, say, hey, what do I think Mothman is? I would say that I think it is some sort of interdimensional interloper. So.
That's a good possibility. In my mind, also I was thinking, some of the people I've talked to about being abducted by aliens, describing how aliens could walk in through their bedroom window, walk through the wall, and also form different shapes at times, different looks of the creature, the alien or whatever. I'm just wondering sometimes, when they go to abduct somebody, they kind of like scan what the person's thinking of or what maybe would scare them or whatever, and they can come in and form that shape. I don't know. I do like your approach better than what I just said, but I just wanted to throw that out there for the listeners.
Well, I think there's something to what you're saying, too, because, we can't even necessarily trust, and you make a really good point when you talk about sort of the malleable nature of, aliens' appearances and things. We can't even necessarily always trust our own senses when it comes to dealing with this stuff. So, there are lots of possibilities. We don't know that it isn't all just, different facets of the exact same phenomenon. We don't know that alien greys aren't the same as Mothman. They're, it's just the same, otherworldly intelligence choosing to appear to us in different forms. I'm not saying that absolutely is, the case. I'm just saying, there are so many weird possibilities, and the fact is, we just frankly don't know. My personal opinion is, I think when it comes to things like aliens, Mothman, even Bigfoot, because there's a lot of real weird, high strangeness, even associated with that. When we're dealing with those things, I think what we're looking at are creatures that basically exist with sort of a separate set of natural laws that apply to them that we just aren't familiar with yet, because our knowledge of the universe is frankly just not evolved enough for us to really understand how they're doing what they're doing. And so, sort of like in the same way that, grizzly bear and a mountain lion are both, apex predators, and they're both mammals, and they're both animals. Yeah, they're related in that way, but a bear is not a mountain lion. So I think that that's sort of what we're dealing with, is just creatures that are tangentially related in that they are sort of under the structure of natural laws that we don't understand yet, that, maybe they all exist in more dimensions than we do, and they're able to manipulate things that we don't understand, and so they're capable of these, fantastic sort of abilities like appearing and disappearing at will, manipulating their appearance to look like whatever they want, or even not even necessarily manipulating their own appearance so much as projecting, in appearance into our minds, projecting thoughts into our minds. Who knows?
That's interesting. Again, R.W. Wells said Native Americans believe that these beings were spirits that were created sometimes to protect the people and others to protect nature.
Yeah, I mean, that's as valid of a belief as any we have. I definitely am never dismissive of any folk belief, any cultural belief, because the fact is, when you look at basically every culture in the world of which I am familiar, you do see these certain consistencies. So indigenous peoples of the Americas, have their ideas of, various animistic spirits that inhabit different things. And that idea exists everywhere. Like my own ancestors, who were largely Germanic tribespeople, had very similar ideas. Like they believed that there were essentially different spirits that would inhabit different places, and they weren't necessarily good or evil. They were capable of dealing out, either weal or woe, depending on their mood and what you had done to irritate or please them at that time. And so I think that what that shows us is not necessarily that, our ancestors had a better idea of what we're dealing with, although they very well may have, because they certainly lived much closer to the spaces that these things seem to most commonly inhabit than we do today, sort of safe in our towns and cities. But I think what it really goes to show the most is that none of this stuff that we're experiencing today is new. UFOs didn't start in 1947. Bigfoot didn't start, in the 60s. Although, I mean, even then, I think people knew about like 19th century stories and stuff like that. But I mean, these phenomena seem to have consistently occurred in the lives of human beings for the entirety of written history.
Oh, yeah.
And that's fascinating to me,
Well, it is to me. Again, I'm going to mention Joe Taylor. Now, he has traveled the world. He takes dinosaur bones and he puts them back together, for museums and all this stuff. He's a scientist, and he was saying years back he was in the Amazon, and somebody came in, one of the villagers came in and claimed that they saw a dinosaur. Well, the next morning, and this dinosaur, actually, the guy was out hunting pigs, and this dinosaur, like a mini, about 9-foot T-Rex, basically grabbed this pig, and the guy threw his arrow, and it hit the dinosaur. Well, evidently, the next morning, Joe and a group of these people went to investigate what this guy claimed. Here was this 9-foot, basically T-Rex, mini T-Rex. In its mouth was a pig, and it died because evidently when the guy threw the spear, it hit one of the major veins, and it killed the creature. And in my schooling, when I went to school, we were told dinosaurs don't exist. They're gone. But, he claims there's still parts in this world where they still exist, not, huge, because the oxygen can't, sustain, a huge dinosaur anymore, because the oxygen content is not there. But even a 9-foot or a 6-foot creature like a lizard or whatever, that would be so scary. But that tells you that there's things out there that we were told don't exist that do.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, that's my entire career in the paranormal is predicated on that idea. I think that there is something very disturbing to the materialist mainstream scientific community, in how threatening a lot of this might be to their paradigm. Although I don't know that that's always the case for why, maybe more mainstream scientists don't pay attention to this stuff. I think, at least in my experience, from speaking to people, because I do have a lot of friends who are, mainstream academics and or work in science. And so it's sort of a mixture, I think, of what I was talking about before, where it's just sort of this paradigm threatening set of ideas that they just don't want to have anything to do with, because it's kind of scary, frankly. And then there are people who just sort of bought into the status quo to the point where they're just not interested. It isn't necessarily that they feel very strongly one way or another. It's just their whole lives people have been telling them that this is impossible and it's stupid and it doesn't exist. And so it's not going to it's not going to change the price of a loaf of bread or anything. And so it doesn't affect their daily life. And so they just sort of dismiss it. So. But it's definitely it's a huge issue. I think that we're seeing more mainstream sources take certain aspects of the paranormal seriously. I think anybody paying attention would have seen the New York Times covering something like the UFO story that they did relatively recently as pretty big news. I don't know that we really understand the ramifications of that yet. For a news outlet like the New York Times to be covering a secret Pentagon UFO program and taking it seriously and talking about government insiders, working with a former pop star to, basically try to bring about a form of slow disclosure. And, and nobody in the newsroom is laughing. It's not tongue in cheek or anything. Nobody's playing the X-Files theme during this story. That's kind of a big deal, So we're finally seeing enough people taking it seriously. I think we're hopefully will be able to at least get the people who don't have a violent reaction against the idea that some of this stuff actually exists to maybe start paying a little bit more attention. Maybe once they realize that there really is something to it, and they should be paying attention to it. And